Um, Rabbi Morey Young, it is such a pleasure to be with you today and to have the opportunity to ask you a few questions about an upcoming class that you're going to be teaching for us on Melton Plus called God Shopping. It's a great name. It's a great name for a class, no matter what's in it. And actually, a lot of people have seen the name and said, including our executive director, and she said, "What's that class about?" And I said, "You can't imagine what it's about. I can imagine what it's about, but we're not going to have to imagine because we're going to have the opportunity to ask you directly and find out." So first, please do us a favor, introduce yourself, where you're at, what you're doing, and then we'll get into your class.
Thanks. I'm really excited to be talking with you and to become part of the Melton space here. Yep. So Mary Young. I'm the rabbi at Woodlands Community Temple. Woodlands is a roughly 400 member household congregation in Westchester, New York. So just about 25 minutes, 30 minutes north of New York City. Although if it's rush hour, it might take you 4 hours, who knows? But it's a good neck of the woods to be part of. I've been at Woodlands ever since I was ordained from Hebrew Union College. I was the intern there for 2 years and then spent time as a rabbi educator there and have been the senior rabbi for a few years now.
Wonderful. It's always great. Start one place, get to stay there, and it's just wonderful. I'm sure that's quite appreciated among the congregants to have known you, to continue to know you there. So if it's okay, let's get right into the class you're going to be teaching. You called the class God Shopping. It's such a unique and engaging concept. So my first question for you is, what sparked your passion for creating a workshop that encourages participants to actively shop for their personal theology, rather than simply presenting them with traditional concepts of God?
Yeah. So I have to give credit where credit is due, and this is where my history at Woodlands really comes in. The concept for God shopping actually came from my teacher and rabbi, Rabbi Billy Dreskin, along with his wife, Cantor Ellen Dreskin, and Rabbi Mark Dov Shapiro of blessed memory. The three of them conceived of this many, many years ago and have lovingly given me permission to use it in this space and in other spaces. But the concept behind it is one that is congruent with lots of other ways that I approach teaching, in that ancient text and tradition can blend seamlessly with the way that our modern minds think. And in the case of God shopping, it's saying you have the personal agency to find a God's concept that feels relevant and real for you, but you can't just pluck it out of the air. That we have millennia of Jewish texts and teachings that can inform that choice. So, in many ways, it's a very classical Reform Jewish approach to this big concept of God. But I also think that it's any Jew's approach to God, because Judaism tells you so many things, and then it's up to you to make meaning of it in your own life.
Wow, that's great. Um, so the notion of shopping, to be just to clarify it, you are going to have like a display of a variety of different gods or concepts of God that are out there, and then the notion is, once we introduce a number of them to you, find the one from our tradition, perhaps that speaks most to you. And if you want, you could probably choose two or three as well, I assume.
And the idea is to mix and match amongst them. Now, it's interesting what you're bringing up. On the one hand, you could see God shopping as, oh, are there, all these discrete gods or
Mhm.
ideas of gods out there, and I'm choosing the one that's right for me, which feels, quite idolatrous, quite frankly.
Right?
Um, This is saying actually Jewish tradition is not monolithic. It says actually, how dare we think we can understand the totality of God? That our tradition presents many different ways of looking at God, all the different faces of God, facets of God, that we humans are just trying to get a snapshot of, because how could our brains possibly wrap our minds around the
Mm.
entirety of the divine? So it's not that we're going, shopping down the walkway for this God versus that God, but it's, oh, what are the ways that I can tap into the one true God, the one that the Jewish people have a unique relationship to? What are the ways that I'm going to um, feel like I've put a plug into an electrical socket, right? And I'm accessing God in a way that's going to be most potent for me and help me to live my life not just Jewishly but as a good person.
Wow, that's spectacular. One of the traditional, I would say, complexities of God is that right from the beginning, our rabbis tell us that there's a God of mercy and a God of justice. And they tell us, that that's the same God, right? So how would you, like, in the context of God shopping and presented with two very different manifestations of God, and these happen to be two very traditional manifestations of God,
Mhm.
how might you help a person make sense or embrace that kind of that tension? Is there a way to do it? Do you just I want to hear from you?
Well, the session opens, and I don't think I'll be giving away too much, but the session opens with asserting sort of what Judaism requires of us when it comes to God, right? That there is a God, that God is one, like these basic foundations, but then it gets left up to us as to figuring out how we're going to relate to that God. Um, so, one of the prompts at the very start is I would like for there to be a God because. And then people fill in why human beings have attached themselves to this concept of a God. I was an anthropology major back in the day, right? So I can look at a God concept very objectively, like why humans would want a God in their lives. But what comes out of that conversation is understanding that at different times, different spaces, different ages, we might have a different relationship to God because of our lived experiences. And at a given moment, I might need a God who stands for justice and is going to give me the koach, it's going to give me the strength to go out and march in the streets and speak truth to power. And sometimes I need a God of comfort because I've lost a loved one. And I need to know that that person is in the arms of something greater and that I'm going to survive what I'm going through. Same God, but manifesting differently depending on where I'm at in my life.
Wow, that's great. What a great way of approaching it. Uh, as I understand it, the session is going to emphasize interactive exploration and personal reflection by the participants. I was just wondering if you could share a specific experience of your own, either in your own journey or in your teaching, that demonstrated the power of this hands-on approach to this theological exploration.
Mm. We do this with all kinds of with many different ages. So I will do this exercise with my folks who are choosing Judaism. It's a really helpful way to find some language and connecting into this huge concept of God. We also do this with our confirmation students. And what's particularly powerful of doing this with confirmation students in 10th grade, about 16 years old, is that that's, the time in their development where they're most likely to say, I do not believe in God. And that's fine. I don't shoot them down when they say that, but it's very age appropriate for a teenager to come in with that pushback. And when you
Hmm.
bring something like God shopping that says, well, when you say God, what exactly do you mean? Are you internalizing the messaging that you get from modern American society when it comes to God? Well, that might not be the Jewish approach to God. And it breaks that down for them and goes to show that Judaism itself has this openness to what God may be and how God may function in our lives. And it's beautifully disarming for our 16-year-olds because all of a sudden
Hmm.
they realize that whatever questions they have or pushback they have is accepted by Jewish tradition. And then they go, oh, there's a place for me in all of this.
Hmm. I want to ask you because in Melton, we're really committed to pluralistic learning, and so therefore, um, our learners come from all kinds of backgrounds, all kinds of educations, some stronger than others. Um, we have people who believe in God, and we have people who don't believe in God. We have Jews who are active learners who don't believe in God. Is there something for them to get out of a class like this, to come to a class called God Shopping, even though actually they're in their kishkas, they don't really believe in God?
That's where I absolutely think there's a place for them, because as someone personally who has a much more broad definition of what God may be, I don't actually often use the word God. I'll often use the divine, higher power, these things that you could say are euphemisms, but I actually think speak to my concept of holiness in this world and the connective force amongst all of us. And when you start to use different language, you start to realize, oh, maybe I don't believe in the God who is judging my every act, but I do believe in a connective force of all creation. And so while I won't be trying to convince anyone to believe something that is not authentic to them, or saying there's no place for you in Judaism because of that, what I will hope to do is help folks find language of where they find holiness in their lives. And that doesn't have to be called God at the end of the day, but something sacred, something special.
And if you had a person who's got a strong faith in God, let's say um, a strong faith in, let's say, a God who's involved in everything.
Mm,
A God who offers a very personal God with divine providence on an individual level. Um, are there some of the things that they'll be exposed to, or that you would, whether in this particular lesson or in general, when you're teaching about God, that you think would be important for even a person who has, a faith that, everything is meant to be, everything that happens is from God? What else could they glean from God shopping?
I think it asks some deeper questions then of the person who has that strong relationship of, okay, you have that strong relationship. How do you navigate major things that happen in the world? The big questions like, why do bad things happen to good people? Right? If you have a strong relationship to God and you live in a God fearing way, why might calamity still happen, tragedy still happen to you or to others? Those are still big questions that I think even the most secure person in their relationship to God is still asking themselves, like, why would God then behave in such a way? Why would God allow tragedy to happen? That's a eternal Jewish question.
Hmm. And that would help them to have to maybe revisit their sort of like simple understanding of God in the world, and try to figure out if there's other nuances or some shades of complexity, perhaps, that they should be thinking about. Yeah. Parenthetically, about 12 years ago, I guess, 12, 13, maybe even or 14 years ago, I wrote a book called Where's My Miracle? And in the book, my goal is to try to like present all the multiple approaches that Judaism has to dealing with tragedy, and say that, you see, there's not just one approach. There's many authentic approaches. And it could very well be that your whole life you've had a hard time believing in God because you understood that there was one Jewish approach, like, in other words, the approach that everything that happens is from God. So if that's the case, then I don't want to believe in a God that would do this or this or this. So it's exposing them to um, the variety of positions that our tradition has about God's role. So that'll be wonderful for people.
I appreciate your word of authenticity, right? That each God concept that I bring within this workshop is rooted in a text, or it says, it'll give like a quote from liturgy, right? And it'll say, okay, you've said these words before. So this is where our tradition is tapping into one aspect, but then we'll bring a quote from Tanakh or Bible or something like that that shows where there's another authentic one. So each concept is rooted in an authentic, mainstream Jewish text or tradition.
Wonderful, thank you. As a person who's been involved as an educator of adults for many years, I think the most exciting thing for me is when you know I present a class, we have a topic of discussion, whatever it is, and I get an email or a phone call or a parking lot conversation from somebody who says, "Wow, I just want you to I that was like transformative. Like I never thought of it that way. I never ever thought of it that way." Um, have you had any of those experiences that you can think of in talking about God with adults that and any of you could share that that might be just illustrative of the kind of things that people will be doing in this class, learning in this
I
class?
think that what I've seen happen with adults in this course more often than not is being given permission to articulate something other than this old man on a cloud with a beard concept of God. Even in adulthood, I think people hold on a lot of anxiety about saying, I don't know that that's what it looks like for me. And then you start to get into, well, I'm a bad Jew territory, or where people start to believe,
Mm,
well, I'm not like such a really good Jew because I don't know how I feel about God. And I find that it's very empowering for people where they start to go, oh, there's not just a place for me, but I'm in line with a very traditional aspect of Jewish thought. I think there's like an
mm.
exhale that happens. So they go, oh,
Yeah,
oh, I'm okay. All right.
that-
And that can be
yeah,
really reassuring.
yeah, that's great. That's the best. And I think, we've been living here in Israel through a lot of challenging times, and it's so interesting because on the one hand, this experience that we've all been experiencing has been breeding greater faith, it seems, like
Mm,
greater turning to Jewish identity, a greater turning to God. We hear stories of the soldiers, we hear stories of the hostages that turned actually under these dire circumstances. They wind up turning to God. And I know you could simply say, there's no atheist in a foxhole. That's one approach to it. But I feel like when I listen to their stories, there's something more authentic than that that's coming through. Something that's speaking to a dimension of themselves that they weren't in touch with before. And I wonder if you could comment on that. Does this God shopping or this notion of studying the notion of God help people in some way in their own journey? And in what way that might that be?
yeah, I thank you for sharing all of that. I think on the one level, there's a empowerment and strength that people find in turning to God in these moments, and then having permission to define that in a way that's going to bring them the most comfort and strength.
Mhm.
And to say it's always accessible to you, even if it's not always at the forefront. Sometimes we turn to these things because the going gets tough, and that's okay, right? It doesn't make it any
Mhm.
less authentic. I also think from an American Jewish standpoint, we're finding in this moment that people are drawing closer to the synagogue, and really seeking out Jewish community and God by extension. And people who maybe didn't have that relationship to God per se are diving into it yet again. And I think part of that is connected to understanding that there's a greater connection they have to the Jews in Israel, to the Jews around them. There's this familial connectivity that's happening for people that is not just, oh, I know someone, therefore I feel connected, but it's I feel spiritually connected to what's happening over there. And some people are very surprised by that. They go, I didn't know I had that connection. I didn't know it was so strong in me. And to not only call that Klal Yisrael, like the connection of the Jewish people, but to also understand that it taps back into the oneness of the divine as well is something that has surprised people, but I think they find very nourishing and is a helpful answer for why they're so activated in this moment.
Spectacular. Um, you're doing this for us, like I think it's like a 60-minute one. Is it a 60-minute one time? But how would you off? What's the most common way that you do this as a workshop? Out of curiosity, is it just one meeting or multiple meetings? Or
Usually you do it in a one meeting setting so that it's kind of like an intensive where you take all these different concepts. We will have a checklist in front of us that people will have permission to cross things out or check them off or star them 7 times or to amend the
Mhm.
language a little bit. And then it's that walking away with that worksheet and figuring out how am I going to weave together these different things that felt meaningful to me. That's the ongoing discussion that one I think has with their own soul.
Great. So I don't, not to put you on the spot, and again, like, you don't like this question, you don't have to answer it. But I was just, for it to conclude, I was going to say, if there was someone that you were speaking with, or you met, and you told them that you were teaching this 1 hour session for Melton, and it would, and certainly you'd love them to attend, and you wanted to give them like the elevator speech about this 1 hour workshop. Like, what's it about? Like, in its essence, how would you could you just put it in a few words or whatever you would say to them? Like, if I just asked the question, so Rabbi Young, like, what is this class about? God shopping? Like, what is it? Why should I go? What or my friends? What do we get out of it?
Hmm. I would say that uh, Jewish tradition has given us the power to find our way to God. But there are many different routes up that mountain, so to speak. And so during this session, we are going to look at some of our traditions' pathways to the divine. And we're going to say which trail looks right for me. So maybe the next installation won't be God shopping, but it'll be hiking with God. I don't know. Uh, use whatever metaphor works for you. But we are all on this journey together and individually. So we'll take a look at them and leave with a sense of what one's personal relationship to a God concept would be.
Thank you. That was
Yeah.
great. That was really great. I was thinking going going along with the shopping theme, I think when I think in America, particularly about shopping, shopping is intertwined with online shopping to a great extent today, and which comes along with it, the you want to know that the return policy is like free returns. Like that, I'm happy to shop with you if I know that I can just return it if I don't like it. So like in a certain way, this journey, believing in God or faith in God seems to me, it's not stagnant. It's not about I subscribe to it when I'm 20 years old and that's what I believe in my whole life. No, it's like there's a return policy that goes along with it. You might change as time goes on, and you might want to give back or pass back what you used to believe and embrace something else, and then something else might happen. And the greatness and the way I try to talk about when I talk about the notion of exactly of bad things happening to good people is that there's the beauty of it is that we have this umbrella of approaches, and all of them are under that umbrella. And you might decide to return the one that you really believed in firmly and embrace another one at some time, and you're still going to be under the umbrella of Jewish faith. And that's the greatness of it. So thank you very much for your time and for really a wonderful opportunity to meet you ahead of time. And the opportunity to wish you a Chag
Yes,
Sameach.
you too.
It's a busy time for rabbis, so I really do appreciate your taking the time for this interview, and we look forward to your
Yeah,
to your
I'm
class.
so glad to be connected to you folks and to make your acquaintance and to be part of this. Thanks so much.
All right, wonderful. If you see Bruce before I speak with him, which probably will be the case, just send him my personal regards, and I will thank him
I
for
love that he was
introducing
like
you
this
to us.
silent, it's sort of like when they send a scout to the baseball stadiums and you don't know where, that this like, very important person is sitting in your midst. But I'm
Yeah,
thankful.
he's that's good. It's the best. It's the best. We love to expose our learners throughout Melton to as many different teachers as possible. That's part of really what we
Mm,
stand for. You don't want them to always be learning from the same people, and so that I really appreciate the fact that you're going to be giving us the time to teach it and share with us your thoughts on it, and I'm sure it'll go really well. They'll be very responsive, and we'll be the beneficiaries of it.
great.
So thank
No,
you,
you're
thank
welcome.
you
Have a
again.
good evening, I think, for you.
Yeah, so it goes over here, right?